I sacrificed everything to help a homeless old man. My parents called me an idiot and disowned me completely. 2 years later, one phone call made me face a truth I never could have imagined. The old man I saved was. My name is Santiago, and for years, my life was a suffocating loop of exhaustion and duty. I honestly believed I'd lost everything that mattered, until one rainy day, an encounter with a complete stranger forced me to choose between the family who raised me and the kindness I still believed in. That choice changed everything. I was 30 years old, living in Portland, Oregon, and frankly, my life felt like an endless, grinding treadmill to nowhere. I rented this tiny, damp, moldy room in the suburbs, where the constant drone of highway traffic was my lullaby. Single, no girlfriend, no real future to speak of, just day-to-day survival, because if I ever looked too far ahead, I was afraid I'd just collapse. Every morning, I'd stare at my bloodshot eyes in the mirror and tell myself, just today, Santiago. Tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow always came, and it was always the same. And I'd force a smile, swallow the bitterness, and accept it. My existence revolved around 3 jobs, like 3 tight nooses slowly strangling my time. By day, I was a cashier at Quick Mart, scanning items for drunk guys and stressed-out moms with screaming kids. I'd plaster on a polite smile, ring up purchases, and try not to inhale the stale cigarette smell clinging to everything. Thank you, I'd say, but inside, I was already feeling the exhaustion build. Afternoons meant delivering food for fast eats. I'd brave the slick, rainy streets on my e-bike, bags of hot food chilling fast in the wind. My heart would pound, praying I wasn't late, because every late delivery meant a penalty, and a penalty meant a cheap sandwich for dinner instead of something decent. Then, late into the night, I'd work security at an abandoned warehouse. Sitting in that dark booth, staring at monitors, I'd fight to keep my eyes open, my body screaming for sleep. I rarely got more than 4 or 5 hours. I'd wake up aching like I'd been beaten, but I always put on a cheerful face, telling myself, this is just temporary. Things will get better. I'll find an office job, normal hours, and finally, I'll live instead of just surviving. My meals were usually grilled cheese or hot dogs, cheap stuff. But I never complained. I knew I was luckier than many, and every single month, I scraped and saved every penny I could, sending $2,000 back home to my parents in Idaho. My parents, they were all I'd ever really had. I grew up on a poor farm in rural Idaho, where the land was dry and failed crops were just a way of life. My father, Dylan Wright, was a patriarchal man who valued money above all else. A man has to be strong, has to make money, and never complain, he'd bark, his voice raspy from too many cigarettes. Money is the only thing you can rely on, son. My mother, Scarlett, was submissive, always in his shadow. She cooked, cleaned, rarely spoke up. I loved them, the way a child is supposed to love their parents, but honestly, that love wasn't always returned. The money I sent every month was my duty, my way of repaying them for raising me. But in return, I rarely got real care or concern. Maybe a short call on my birthday, or a text checking in, usually when they needed more money. I didn't blame them. I just accepted it. That's how my family worked. That particular day was cold and wet, typical Portland rain, persistent, soaking you to the bone. I was out delivering for fast eats, my e-bike gliding over slippery streets. The food bag on my back, warm but cooling fast. The app timer was counting down, 10 minutes left to deliver this burger 3 blocks away. My heart hammered. You've got to hurry, Santiago, or you won't make it. I pushed harder. Then I saw him. An elderly homeless man, curled up on the sidewalk under a dripping tree. He was thin, trembling like the last leaf of autumn, his skin pale, eyes staring blankly. His clothes were torn and soaked, and he looked utterly exhausted, on the verge of giving out. People rushed past him, a young woman glued to her phone, a middle-aged man pulling a suitcase, a group of laughing teenagers. No one stopped. They pretended not to see him, or maybe they were just too busy with their own lives. I rode past him too, but the image seared itself into my mind, haunting me. I stopped a few meters ahead, my heart racing. Asterisk, you don't have time, Santiago. If you stop, you'll get penalized, and this month's money for home is already tight. Asterisk, I glanced at the timer. 8 minutes left. But then another voice, softer, spoke in my head. The voice of conscience, maybe, or memories of cold nights in Idaho, watching my parents struggle with poverty. I couldn't just leave him. After a moment of hesitation, my hands shaking, I turned back. I ran to the old man and knelt on the wet sidewalk. Sir, are you okay? I asked, my voice thick with worry. He didn't answer, just trembled, his eyes blinking slowly. I touched his shoulder. He was thin and ice-cold. He tried to speak, but the words were slurred and unclear, as if his mind was lost somewhere. He couldn't stand. His limbs were too weak. He could die here if no one helped. Without hesitating anymore, I pulled out my phone and called 911. Hello, I need an ambulance right away. There's an elderly homeless man lying on the street. He looks very weak. The location is the corner of 5th and Oak in Portland. My voice shook, but I tried to stay calm. While waiting, I took off my jacket, the only warm one I had, and draped it over him. The rain soaked my back, but I didn't care. My delivery app buzzed, order late. I knew I'd be fined, probably $50, but at that moment, it didn't matter. The ambulance arrived a few minutes later, its siren cutting through the rain. The paramedics jumped out and quickly checked him. Severe malnutrition, possible hypothermia, one said. They lifted him onto a stretcher, and I decided to follow. I rode my e-bike behind them, called my boss to take emergency time off for the afternoon shift, and headed to the hospital, a knot of worry in my stomach. The hospital was chaotic, beeping machines, the smell of disinfectant. The doctor examined him, and the results left me stunned. Severe malnutrition, very poor health, and signs of memory impairment. The old man had no ID, no information about relatives. The hospital would only provide minimum treatment to stabilize him. I was listed as the temporary contact, signed the papers, and covered what they couldn't. Extra medications, clean clothes, basic necessities. The money in my wallet disappeared fast, but I didn't think much about it then. If I didn't step up, no one else would. In the days that followed, between my work shifts, I made time to visit. Early mornings, before Quick Mart, I'd bring hot soup. After deliveries, I'd rush over to help the nurses wash him. He gradually became more alert, but when asked his identity, he just shook his head. He didn't remember his name, his address, or any family. His memory was gone in patches, like puzzle pieces scattered by the wind. The official diagnosis, Alzheimer's. He can't care for himself and can't be discharged alone, the doctor said. We'll notify social services to arrange placement. My heart felt heavy. I knew those facilities. Overcrowded, lacking personal care, places where people are warehoused. With his memory issues, he'd be lost. And terrified. I walked out into the hospital hallway, sat on a cold plastic chair, and thought deeply. Rain was still falling. Could I really walk away from him? Or was this the moment my life would change in a way I never imagined? The old man, with his slightly clouded eyes and frail body, had become a constant presence in my mind. I didn't know who he was, but seeing him alone and lost made my heart ache. Social services would send him to an overcrowded nursing home, where he'd be crammed together like a ghost, with no one truly caring. With Alzheimer's, he'd wander, lost in unfamiliar hallways, calling out for memories that were gone. I couldn't let that happen. But taking him home? I was a 30-year-old with 3 jobs, a cramped rented room, and the burden of sending money to my parents. It was a crazy decision. Or was it the only right one? The thought haunted me relentlessly. At Quick Mart, I scanned items, my mind miles away, nearly miscalculating change. Delivering food, I pedaled through wet streets, the cold wind slapping my face, the image of him curled on the sidewalk flashing back. At night, on security duty, I stared at the monitors, but saw his face reflected in the shadows. You can't take care of anyone, Santiago, I told myself. You can barely take care of yourself, but then another voice emerged. The voice of compassion, perhaps, or the loneliness I'd buried for years. I'd lived alone for so long, that room is cold as a tomb. Maybe, just maybe, bringing him home would bring a bit of warmth into my life. Or would it destroy everything? By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the unbelievable twists still to come in this story. I lay awake at night, weighing the pros and cons, worrying about money, time, and responsibility. What if he got sicker? What if I couldn't handle it? But abandoning him? No, I couldn't. After 4 days of wrestling with myself, I made the decision. My heart pounded like a war drum. I returned to the hospital late that afternoon. The atmosphere was the same: disinfectant, beeping machines, tired faces. I found the doctor, my voice trembling. I want to take him home. I'll take care of him. The doctor looked at me, eyes full of doubt. Are you sure? This isn't a joke. He needs constant care, and you'll have to sign temporary responsibility papers. I nodded, filled with uncertainty. They handed me a stack of forms: voluntary commitments, legal responsibilities, warnings about Alzheimer's. My hands shook as I signed, the ink smudging. This is your decision, I thought. There's no turning back now. When it was done, a nurse led me to his room. He was sitting on the bed, staring blankly out the window. Sir, I'm going to take you to my home, I said gently. He didn't react much, just nodded vaguely. My heart felt heavy, but also a little relieved, as if an invisible burden had been lifted. The day he was discharged was a gray morning with persistent light rain. I'd asked to leave my quick march shift early, telling my boss it was a family emergency. He grumbled, "This is the last time, Santiago. You've been taking too many days off." I nodded, worried about the deducted pay, but I had no regrets. I arrived at the hospital by bus, carrying a bag with light snacks and clean clothes. The nurse helped him dress, and I wheeled him out. He was weak, walking slowly, leaning on my arm. Careful, sir, I said softly, as if speaking to myself. We took a taxi, a luxury I rarely allowed myself, and headed to my small rented room. The room, with its damp walls and old furniture, suddenly felt even more cramped. I opened the door, the musty smell hitting me, and my heart raced. This is my home, sir. It's not fancy, but it's warm. I cleaned up immediately, pushing the table and chairs to one side of the tiny living room and laying an old mattress on the floor. You can sleep here for now. I'll buy a bed later, I said, even though I had no idea where the money would come from. He sat down, looking around with lost eyes, saying nothing. The first few days were hell. He was still very weak, moving like a ghost, needing to hold on to walls to take a few steps. Early mornings, before work, I helped him bathe, using warm water from the old shower, cheap soap, wiping him down like a son caring for an aging father. I made chicken soup, and since his hands shook too much, I spoon-fed him. My heart tightened every time he coughed, fearing he'd get seriously ill again. Between shifts, I worried constantly. Did he remember how to use the bathroom? I'd call home, hear him mumble something vague, and breathe a sigh of relief. When I got back at night, exhausted, I still sat with him, rambling about my day so he wouldn't feel alone. Gradually, after about 2 weeks, his health improved miraculously. He walked more normally, without trembling, and his appetite returned. Simple meals, bread, eggs, cheap vegetables. He ate heartily, his eyes brighter. Once he whispered, "Thank you," and I smiled, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. But his memory? It didn't improve at all. He still didn't remember his name, his past, or why he'd been living on the streets. One evening, as we sat at the small table, I gently asked who he was. He shook his head. "I don't know. I don't remember anything." My heart sank. He was like a book with all its pages erased, only the worn cover remaining. I couldn't just sit still. I tried to find information about him, calling homeless support centers, posting notices on community boards, even going back to the hospital. No leads, the nurse said regretfully. He might have been wandering for months, even years. I searched online, posting in missing persons groups, but got no responses. Each disappointment left me restless. Asterisk, did he have family? Were they looking for him? Asterisk, with no other options, I let him stay. "You can stay here with me, sir," I said, and he nodded as if it were the most natural thing. My life gradually changed in ways I hadn't expected. The rented room, once silent and cold, now had another presence, a quiet but warm figure. In the mornings, I left early for Quickmart, telling him, "Take care of yourself while I'm gone. I'll be back soon." He nodded, and I left, worried, my heart racing whenever I thought of him alone. But over time, I realized he could handle things within his ability. He swept the floor, washed dishes, even folded clothes, slow but careful movements, like habits from a past life. When I came home exhausted after the night shift, I often found the room tidier, dust gone, things organized, and the smell of food wafting from the small kitchen. He would cook simple meals, vegetable soup, toasted bread, fried eggs, enough for both of us, waiting for me to eat together. We ate in silence, but it was no longer a lonely silence. His memory came and went. He'd confuse recent events, call me by strange names, or forget to turn off the stove. "Sir, my name is Santiago," I'd gently remind him, feeling a pang of sorrow. But he was always kind and gentle, and even without knowing who he was, he knew how to care for others. One evening, I came home late after an extended shift, my body aching. He quietly made hot tea and placed it by my bed. "Drink this to feel better. You worked hard today." My heart warmed in a way it hadn't in years. For the first time, someone was waiting for me, caring without expecting anything in return. I started looking forward to coming home, instead of dreading the emptiness. The house felt less empty. His light coughs, the clink of spoons, his quiet mumbling, all created a new rhythm. But deep down, I still worried. Money was tighter. What if he suddenly remembered and left? Life now felt like a taut wire, full of surprises. But for now, with him by my side, I no longer felt alone. Those evenings, listening to him mumble about fragmented memories, helped me forget some of the exhaustion from my 3 jobs. He wasn't a burden. He was the warmth in this cold room. But harsh reality didn't let me dream for long. Since bringing him home, my financial situation had gotten worse. Living expenses skyrocketed, his medications, more nutritious food, even small things like soap, while my income stayed stubbornly the same. I had to count every penny, skip my morning coffee, choose cheaper food. And worst of all, I was forced to cut back on the $2,000 I sent to my parents each month. At first, I tried to keep it the same, hoping I could manage by working extra hours. But then utility bills went up, and once, when he caught a cold and needed medicine, it drained my wallet dry. The first month, I sent it 3 days late, and only $1,500. My heart pounded as I hit the transfer button, knowing my parents would notice. And just as I'd feared, the phone rang that very evening. It was Dad. His voice came through the speaker, sharp and harsh, without any greeting. "Why is this month's money so little, Santiago? What the hell are you doing over there?" I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the phone tightly. In the living room, the old man was sleeping, his steady breathing drifting through the half-closed door. "Work has been unstable lately, Dad," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Fewer delivery orders, pay cuts." "Unstable? My ass." Dad snapped. "You've been working there for years. Now it's suddenly unstable? Or are you hiding money for your own shit?" I was speechless. Silence stretched. "No, Dad," I said quietly. "I'm still sending it, just not as much." Dad grunted, his voice full of irritation. "Whenever we need it, it's always short. How are we supposed to live here without money?" The call ended abruptly. I hadn't even had a chance to say more. Less than 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed again. This time it was Mom. Her voice was weak and tired, but every word weighed heavily on my chest. "Your dad and I are really struggling. Your brother still hasn't found a job. The electricity bill is about to get cut off this month." I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall. "I know, Mom," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'll figure something out." Mom spoke softly. "Try a little harder, okay? The whole family is counting on you now." I said yes, obediently, my throat tightening. After hanging up, the room fell silent. I looked toward the living room. The old man shifted in his sleep, pulling the thin blanket closer, a familiar reflex. I sat there for a long time, feeling pulled in two directions. On one side was my blood family, waiting for money. On the other, a man who had no one else but me. I didn't want to disappoint my parents, but I also knew that if I turned my back, the old man would have nowhere to go. The calls came more frequently after that. First once a week, then twice. Dad would call early, just as I was getting ready to leave. How much are you sending this month? Don't be late again. Mom would call late at night, her voice trembling, starting with the usual, "Are you okay? Are you eating properly?" Then immediately, the real concern, "I'm just asking, but have you arranged the money yet?" I always found ways to dodge. Work was unstable. Economic downturn. Any excuse, as long as I didn't have to tell the truth. "I'll send it soon," I'd say, my own voice sounding so fake it made me cringe. But the truth was I couldn't. The second month, I sent only $1,000. The third month, just $800. Each transfer felt like cutting a piece of my own flesh. The pressure built on my chest, piling up day by day, leaving no room to breathe. On those long nights, I lay awake, listening to his light snoring from the living room. Streetlight filtered through the window, casting distorted shadows. "You have to choose, Santiago," I told myself. My parents back home weren't wealthy, but they had the small farm. They had Kevin, my brother, even if he was lazy. But the old man, if I put him back on the street or into a social facility, he'd waste away in loneliness. After many nights of weighing, with tears soaking my pillow, I decided to keep caring for him. But deep down, I knew I needed to go home and explain in person. Maybe, looking into my eyes, they'd see my sincerity. I arranged my jobs, took 3 days off, promising my bosses I'd make up the hours. I rented a cheap car, the bus would take too long, and drove to Idaho without telling them. I wanted the surprise. I wanted to see their real reaction. The journey home was endless, 8 hours driving through rainy highways. The scenery grew familiar, dry fields, old wooden houses, the smell of damp earth after rain. When I arrived, the small farmhouse with its patchy roof, front yard overgrown with weeds, my heart pounded. I parked, stepped out, and took a deep breath of the familiar hometown air. The door opened, and right away I saw Kevin, sitting on the porch, cigarette between his fingers, slouched and lazy as ever. He was 25, unemployed for over half a year, living entirely off our parents without a shred of guilt. "What are you doing here?" Kevin asked, voice sarcastic, not bothering to stand or even say hello. I walked inside. The familiar smell of toasted bread and coffee hit me. Dad was at the kitchen table, reading an old newspaper. Mom washing dishes. They looked up surprised. "Santiago, why the sudden visit?" But the surprise quickly turned to irritation. Dad frowned. Mom wiped her hands on her apron, eyes worried. No hug. No smile. Instead, Dad asked right away, "So, where's this month's money? Why haven't you sent it?" I froze, my heart squeezed tight. I'd come home after months away, exhausted from the drive, and the first words were about money. "I came to visit," I said, my voice shaking. "But I have something to tell you." Under that pressure, I knew I couldn't hide it anymore. We sat around the kitchen table. The yellow light made the room feel even more stifling. Kevin leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a mocking smirk on his lips. I took a deep breath, spoke slowly, trying to stay calm. I told them about that cold, rainy day, the old man curled up on the sidewalk. My decision to stop, call emergency services, the days in the hospital. I told them about bringing him home, every meal, every night I came back from work to find the kitchen lights still on. "He has Alzheimer's," I said, my voice starting to tremble. "He doesn't remember who he is. Has no one." I couldn't leave him out there freezing. Dad narrowed his eyes, tapping his fingers on the table. I swallowed and continued, this time looking straight at him. "Living costs have gone up a lot. So, starting next month, I'll have to temporarily stop supporting the family until I stabilize my finances." The kitchen fell silent for a few brief seconds. Then, Dad slammed his hand on the table. "What did you just say?" he roared. "You're using money to feed a stranger and then come here to cut off your own parents. That money belongs to the family." He went on, voice growing louder. "You're such an idiot. Always meddling in other people's business. Wasting your hard work on some nobody while your parents here are scraping by on the little you send. I stiffened. I hadn't even opened my mouth when Mom cut in, her voice high and sharp. You're really ungrateful. We're old now. Can't work anymore. Don't you think about us? We raised you all these years just for you to turn your back now. Kevin chuckled softly, leaning back. You like playing the hero, huh? Saving a homeless old man to feel noble. He looked me up and down. If you've got so much free time, why not save your own family first? The words came fast and relentless, like knife cuts straight into my chest. I opened my mouth, but my throat choked up. Every explanation felt meaningless. I suddenly realized this wasn't just an outburst. It was contempt that had been there for a long time, just waiting for a chance to surface. In their eyes, all my efforts and sacrifices had never been valued. I wasn't a son. I was just a steady source of money. Dad stared at me, his voice turning ice cold. Each word heavy as stone. If you keep supporting that old man, then as of today, I no longer have a son like you. Choose. No one in the room said another word. I sat there, numb, realizing some boundaries, once crossed, have no way back. I chose silence. No arguing. No explaining. What good were words when their hearts were already closed? I stood up, legs heavy as lead, and left the house quietly. Kevin sneered behind me. Mom sobbed softly. Dad turned away. Outside, rain began to fall, soaking my clothes. I drove back to Portland, carrying a heaviness and a hurt I couldn't share with anyone. The road stretched endlessly, and for the first time, I wondered, what is family if it's not a place to come home to? My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, eyes fixed on the pitch-black highway. Headlights cast faint streaks of light on the wet road. Rain hammered on the windshield like a relentless drumbeat in my head. At first, my mind was blank, an endless void. But then, old memories gradually flooded back, pulling me against the current of time, making my heart tighten in waves. From a young age, I'd had to fend for myself. Those summers in Idaho when I was 8, I'd wake at dawn to feed chickens and help in the garden. Meanwhile, Kevin, 5 years younger, would just ride his bike around the neighborhood with friends, and no one made him come home on time. You're the older one. You need to help your parents, Dad would say sternly. I wasn't allowed to ask for anything. No new toys, no snacks. Every time I opened my mouth, Mom would shake her head, her voice weak. Let your brother have it. He's still little. I always had to yield. Put Kevin first. Like on my 10th birthday, I dreamed of an old bicycle to ride to school, but Dad said there was no money. Then, the next week, Kevin got a new ball because he was feeling down. I swallowed my tears, telling myself I had to be strong, had to be the pillar. But deep down, I felt the unfairness like a smoldering wound that never healed. School was the same. I always tried hard to get good grades so my parents would be proud, but they took it for granted. Of course, you can do that, Dad said, his tone casual as talking about the weather. No praise, no reward. But with Kevin, when he got bad grades or skipped homework, they'd make excuses. He's still young. Don't push him too hard, Mom would say, stroking Kevin's head while I sat in the corner, studying alone until late at night. Sooner than other kids, I had to work odd jobs to help the family. At 13, I was already working on the neighbor's farm, mowing lawns, picking fruit in scorching greenhouses, my back aching. The money I earned? I handed it all to Dad, keeping just a few dollars for school supplies. Meanwhile, Kevin was allowed to focus on himself, playing sports, hanging out with friends, shielded like a noble child in a poor household. Your brother needs time to grow, Mom would say defensively. I didn't envy Kevin. I just wondered why his maturity was something to wait for, while mine was treated as an obligation. Every time I made a mistake, breaking a plate or forgetting to feed the chickens, I immediately became the example for comparison. You're grown now and still so clumsy. Look at your brother, Dad would yell, voice harsh, face red with anger. But with Kevin, it was different. When he messed up, they just gently reminded him, be more careful next time, okay? Those small differences, repeated day after day, build up like drops of water silently filling a glass. I recognized the unfairness early on, but I never dared speak up. I was afraid of being called selfish, afraid of being seen as the troublemaking child, afraid that one word of protest would be enough to crack the family. When I grew up and left Idaho to work in Portland, my role in the family gradually shrank to nothing more than the person who sent money regularly each month. I remember the day I left, an old suitcase packed with a few clothes. Dad just patted my shoulder, work hard, and send money home. No words of good luck. No goodbye hug. Mom cried, but quickly wiped her tears. Remember to send the money early, son. From then on, my life was a loop. Work, save, transfer $2,000 every month like an unnamed tax. But I knew full well that most of that money wasn't just for my parents' living expenses. More than once, just days after I sent the money, Kevin would post on social media, showing off new things, trendy clothes, the latest phone, or check-ins at bars with friends. Weekend stress relief, he'd caption. While I was breaking my back with 3 jobs in Portland. I never asked directly, afraid of making things tense. But I understood. My parents had grown used to taking my money to make up for my brother's mistakes, his laziness, his endless partying. Your brother's going through a tough time, Mom would often say over the phone, her voice flat, like a well-rehearsed explanation. Help him out a little longer, okay? These things repeated for years, making me gradually realize I'd never been seen as a son who needed care, just a financial resource. I remember one Christmas I called home, excited to talk about work. But Dad interrupted, "Why haven't I seen this month's money yet?" He didn't ask what I was eating, how I was sleeping, if I was tired. I was a walking ATM, nothing more. This incident, when I confessed about the old man, wasn't the first time I'd been dismissed. It was just the straw that broke the camel's back. The first time I no longer had the strength to keep enduring. On the highway, those memories made me tremble. I slowed the car, tears streaming down, wiping them hastily with my sleeve. Asterisk, where did I go wrong? Why was I treated like this? Asterisk, I asked myself, heart full of pain. The rain fell harder. Visibility blurred, and I nearly lost control of the wheel. Pulling over to the shoulder, I sat there gasping, feeling like the whole world was collapsing. As the car neared Portland, the emptiness and exhaustion inside me grew sharper. The city lights twinkled, but they brought no warmth. I was drained, body aching from 8 hours of driving, spirit shattered by those harsh words. When I finally reached my small rented room, I parked unsteadily, opened the door, and stepped inside, physically and emotionally spent. The door creaked, and instead of the usual musty smell, the aroma of food filled the air. Warm canned bean soup. From the kitchen, I saw the old man diligently cooking, his movements slow but careful. He stirred the pot, hands trembling slightly, but his eyes focused. On the table, simple dishes were already set out: bread, canned bean soup, and a sliced apple. The room was tidier than when I'd left, floor wiped clean, things neatly arranged. I stood frozen for a moment, feet rooted to the spot. After a day of being rejected by my own blood family, the person waiting for me to come home was a stranger with no shared blood. He looked up, saw me, and gave a vague smile. "You're back. Eat while it's hot. It won't taste good cold." His voice was soft, but full of warmth, the kind of warmth I'd never received from my parents. In that moment, I felt this small house, cramped and lacking as it was, gave me a sense of peace greater than anywhere else. Tears rolled down, but this time, they were tears of relief. I sat down at the table, ate in silence, and for the first time I thought, asterisk, maybe family isn't about blood. It's about the people who choose to stay by your side. Asterisk, after that stressful trip back home, I returned to the grind of work, but nothing felt the same anymore. My parents' harsh words haunted me, like deep knife cuts into my heart. I tried to forget, throwing myself into work to fill the void, but the financial pressure and emotional wounds gradually wore down my health in a very noticeable way. At first, it was just prolonged fatigue. After the 8-hour drive back to Portland, I got home completely drained, my mind spinning. I thought one night's rest would fix it, but it didn't. In the days that followed, I still got up early for Quick Mart, scanning items with trembling hands and blurred vision from lack of sleep. In the afternoons, delivering food, I pedaled through light rain, cold wind slapping my face, and dizziness started to hit me. At night on security duty, sitting in the dark booth, I had to prop my chin to keep from nodding off. The costs for the old man, medications, more nutritious food, forced me to cut back on everything. No morning coffee, no snacks, even reducing my own portions. Each month, my wallet grew thinner, and that burden felt like a rock pressing on my chest. I told myself to be strong, to keep going, but my body didn't listen. The pressures piled up, worrying about the old man, money troubles, and the pain from my own flesh and blood family. I started coughing, lightly at first, but then persistently, with fits that made my chest ache sharply. Then a high fever struck suddenly, like a storm. One morning, I woke up burning hot, my head heavy, coughing nonstop. I tried to sit up, but my legs were jelly. I didn't have the strength to stand. "Sir, I'm not feeling well," I whispered, my voice hoarse. The old man came in from the living room, moving slowly, but his eyes were worried. "Just lie still," he said, his voice rough but gentle. The days that followed were hell. I was bedridden, fever spiking to 39 degrees Celsius, 102.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Endless coughing, leaving me exhausted and completely drained. Some days I couldn't even get up to go to work and had to call in sick, heart full of worry about the deducted pay. My boss at Quickmart grumbled, "If you take any more time off, I'll fire you for good," but I couldn't help it. My body had betrayed me. During those days, the old man cared for me in his slow but remarkably attentive way. He wasn't quick or agile, and his memory came and went, but his concern was like a cool stream, soothing the pain. Luckily, I'd stocked up on food, so he didn't have to go out shopping alone. He made simple soups, stewed vegetables with a bit of cheap canned meat or fish, seasoned just right. Every morning, he puttered in the tiny kitchen, hands shaking as he stirred the pot, the smell of soup filling the room. "Try to eat so you'll get better," he'd say, bringing the bowl to my bedside and spoon-feeding me. I sipped each mouthful, warmth spreading down my throat. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching me closely, as if afraid to miss something. "Have you taken your medicine?" he'd ask, then pause, frowning in thought. "Let me check again." He'd shuffle to the old alarm clock, reset it, even though I knew he'd just done it moments ago. He'd go to the medicine cabinet, open it, close it, then open it again. "Have you taken it yet?" he'd mutter. "Better check to be sure." Sometimes he'd forget I'd just taken it and go back to the kitchen to reheat more soup. Sometimes he'd stand in the middle of the room, looking around as if searching for something, then bend down to straighten an already neat blanket. He wiped every corner of the floor, refilled my water glass, put everything in its place, slowly but carefully. He repeated familiar tasks over and over, as if stopping might make him forget he was caring for someone. Watching him fuss like that, I suddenly understood. He didn't remember who he was, but he still remembered how to care for others. Not through memory, but through habits etched deep into his body. I lay there, throat tight with emotion. I whispered, "Thank you." He turned, looked at me for a moment, eyes kind but vague. He smiled and nodded reassuringly. "Just rest. I'll take a break, too." He didn't say who I was, but he stayed. While lying ill in the midst of feverish delirium, I texted my parents, hands shaking as I held the phone. I typed, "I'm really sick. High fever and a bad cough. I'm struggling a lot." I sent it, hoping for a call, some encouragement, even a plan to visit, but nothing. The message just sat there, unread or ignored. The first day I checked my phone constantly, heart racing every time the screen lit up. Nothing. The second day, still silence. As the days dragged on in hopeless waiting, I gradually realized my serious illness wasn't enough to make them care. Maybe they were still angry, still saw me as ungrateful. Or simply, when the money stopped coming regularly, I no longer mattered. That indifference cut like a knife, deeper than the physical pain. I lay there, staring at the moldy ceiling, heart full of emptiness and sadness. The contrast between the old man's devoted care, a stranger, and my parents' coldness hurt terribly. The person by my side when I was at my weakest wasn't my blood family. Why do they treat me like this? I asked myself, tears soaking the pillow. Time passed slowly but relentlessly. After more than a week, I recovered enough to return to work. My body was still weak, but gradually readjusting to the old rhythm. The old man hadn't changed much. His health was stable. He went about his daily routine, cooking simple meals, tidying the small room, sometimes mumbling fragmented stories about a past he himself no longer fully grasped. His memory didn't improve. Sometimes he forgot my name, sometimes called me something unfamiliar, then stopped. But he lived peacefully in that familiar space beside me. To feel more at ease, when I had to leave for work, I stuck reminder notes around the room. Turn off the stove, lock the door, drink water. I also wrote down the address and my phone number on paper, folded it neatly, and put it in his pocket, just in case he went out and couldn't find his way back. Those little things didn't help his memory, but they eased my worry whenever I left the house. Before I knew it, nearly 2 years had passed since the day I brought him home. In those 2 years, the small room had become a true home. I still worked 3 jobs. Still saved every penny, but with him there, everything felt more bearable. We had routines. Mornings, I went to work. He stayed home. Evenings, we ate together, chatted about nothing in particular. He talked about scattered memory fragments, a green garden, a big house, but nothing clear. I listened, curious, but never pushing. During that time, my parents gradually reduced contact. The rare check-in calls stopped. Messages grew fewer, then almost completely silent. That year's birthday, no greetings. Christmas, no call. It was as if, once the regular money stopped, my presence in the family no longer mattered. I checked my phone. The last message from Mom was 3 months ago. Have you sent money to your parents yet? It stung, but I grew numb. I stopped calling. Stopped texting. Maybe this was my way to freedom. But loneliness still crept in, especially late at night. Then one day, everything changed. It was a rare Sunday afternoon off. I was lying in bed, scrolling news on my phone. The old man was napping in the living room, his light snoring echoing softly. I scrolled absent-mindedly past articles on current events, sports, then stopped at a missing person notice on a local website. Headline: Family searching for Arthur Caldwell, missing for 8 years. I skimmed it, but the description, age around 70, memory impairment, missing for that long, caught my attention. My heart beat faster. Approximately 5 feet 9 inches, silver hair, blue eyes, suffers from Alzheimer's, wandered off and couldn't find his way home. I sat up, hands shaking as I scrolled to the photo. An old picture. A man in a neat suit, smiling confidently, younger, but the face was eerily familiar. Square-jawed, deep-set eyes, that vague smile. It was the old man living with me. I was stunned. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I couldn't believe my eyes. I zoomed in to be sure. Though the man in the photo was younger, hair dark with some gray, the features were identical. The small scar on his right cheek, the wrinkles around his eyes. The missing person's name was Arthur Caldwell, head of a major financial dynasty. The article said the family had been searching for him for 8 years with no leads. He disappeared after a business trip and vanished. Large reward for information. I read it over and over, heart pounding like a drum. The thought that this simple man who cooked soup for me might be a powerful figure left me confused and cautious. He was a billionaire, owner of a financial empire. How had he ended up homeless in Portland? I glanced toward the living room where he slept peacefully, unaware. If this was true, both our lives would soon change in ways we couldn't avoid. Would I lose him, or would my life be turned upside down? My mind was in turmoil. Excitement mixed with fear. I realized that if what I just read was true, the quiet, simple existence we'd grown accustomed to might end, giving way to changes no one was prepared for. I didn't know what lay ahead, only that in this moment, that fragile piece had begun to crack, even though I hadn't done anything to hold it together. I sat there, phone still clutched tightly in my hand, the screen glowing with the photo of Arthur Caldwell. My heart was pounding as if I'd just run a marathon, cold sweat breaking out along my spine. The old man, or Arthur, was napping in the living room, his light snoring drifting softly, completely unaware of the storm raging in my mind. I turned off the screen, stood up, and paced the room, trying to calm myself. The face was identical, even though the photo was old. The man in it looked younger, more confident, in an elegant suit, with a powerful smile. My old man only wore faded t-shirts and worn jeans, living simply like a homeless person who had found shelter. But if he was Arthur Caldwell, head of a financial empire, then what? What would I do? Inform his family, or stay silent and let this life continue? The thought panicked me. I didn't rush to contact anyone. No, I needed time to cross-check everything, to be certain this wasn't an illusion or a mistake. In the days that followed, I spent every free moment digging deeper. At Quickmart, I scanned items, my mind elsewhere, just waiting for my shift to end. Delivering food, I pedaled faster, restless inside. At night, on security duty, sitting in the dark booth, I used my phone to search for more public information about Arthur Caldwell. I typed his name into Google, scrolling through old articles, Wikipedia pages, and business profiles. The results left me stunned. Arthur Caldwell was indeed the head of a major financial dynasty called Caldwell Investments, with billions in assets and branches across the US and Europe. He was a legend in the business world, known for shrewd deals and a private personal life. His disappearance had made headlines years ago, in 2017, after a business trip to the Pacific Northwest. He vanished without a trace. The family offered a large reward, police investigated, but there were no leads. Articles described him as having early-stage Alzheimer's before he went missing, and that he might have wandered off, unable to find his way home. Every detail matched: age, height, identifying features, even the scar on his cheek. I read it over and over, heart racing wildly, feeling like I was in a Hollywood movie rather than my real life. "He's real," I whispered, my mind in turmoil. But I still hesitated. If I contacted them, would he leave? Would I be alone again? I decided to talk to the old man first, to see if there were any clues. One evening, after a simple dinner of vegetable soup and bread, we sat at the table, the yellow light casting long shadows on the wall. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling. "Sir, do you know anyone named Arthur Caldwell?" He looked up, his slightly clouded eyes blinking slowly, and shook his head. "The name Arthur sounds familiar, but I don't remember." I swallowed hard and continued. "Do you remember anything about your family? A big house, or someone named Emily?" He was silent for a moment, fingers tracing the table edge as if trying to pull memories from an abyss. "I remember a garden and children laughing, but it's not clear." "Who am I? Do I have grandchildren?" His voice sounded lost, making my heart ache. In the end, he still didn't remember who he was, or react to the name Arthur, or any details. I forced a smile and changed the subject. "It's okay, sir. I was just asking randomly." But my heart felt heavy. He didn't remember, but his family did. I couldn't keep him forever, no matter how much I wanted to. After many sleepless nights, lying awake listening to his light snoring, I made the decision, my heart pounding as if it would burst. I contacted the information listed in the missing person notice, a phone number and email. The contact was Emily Caldwell, Arthur's granddaughter. I chose to call, since an email might be ignored. The phone rang for a long time. Then a young woman's voice answered, professional but weary. "Emily Caldwell speaking." I took a deep breath, my voice shaking. "Hello, this is Santiago Wright from Portland. I saw the notice about Arthur Caldwell, and I think he's with me." Silence on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. "Are you serious? Or are you trying to scam us for the reward money?" I told her everything, the rainy day, rescuing him from the street, taking him to the hospital, caring for him for 2 years. I described his appearance, his Alzheimer's, every detail. Hearing what I provided, Emily sounded both shocked and emotional, her voice trembling. "Oh my God, my grandfather has been missing for 8 years. We've never stopped searching. What you're describing, his health, memory, circumstances, it matches perfectly. Do you have photos? Send them to me." I sent pictures of him sleeping, and Emily cried. It's him. It's definitely him. The descriptions of his health, memory, and current situation convinced Emily the match was highly likely. She expressed her desire to come pick him up immediately. I'll fly to Portland right away. Give me the address. But I refused to hand him over to a stranger. He couldn't make decisions for himself, his memory was lost, and I'd never met Emily. I feared a scam, or worse, that he'd be taken unsafely. I'm sorry, but I can't just hand him over like that, I said firmly. He trusts me. I'll bring him to you myself and meet you in person to confirm. Silence for a moment, then Emily sighed. I understand. You're right to be cautious. I'll send you the family home address in California. Please help bring him back. We'll be waiting. After a brief hesitation, Emily agreed, sending the address, a villa in the San Francisco suburbs. I immediately arranged my work, heart full of worry and excitement. I requested extended leave, accepting the risk of losing my jobs despite my boss's grumbling. I rented a cheap car, since the bus would be too tiring for him. The next morning, I gently woke him. Sir, today I'm taking you on a long trip. He nodded vaguely, asking no questions. We left Portland in light rain. He sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window with vacant eyes. The 10-hour journey took us along endless highways, scenery shifting from Oregon's green forests to California's hills and mountains. I drove, my mind racing. Would he remember home? Was Emily real? Tension rose. At every rest stop, I checked on him, fearing he'd panic. When we arrived late in the afternoon, I saw it, a large, discreet villa, carefully secured. High iron gates, cameras everywhere, lush green gardens. My heart pounded, hands gripping the wheel. As soon as we entered the grounds, the old man had strange, instinctive reactions. He slowed his steps, looking around longer than usual, a flicker of familiarity in his eyes. This place? I think I know it, he mumbled, holding my arm tighter. Emily Caldwell came out to greet us. A young woman around 25, long brown hair, dressed simply but exuding elegance. Her initial demeanor was reserved and weary as she saw me, a strange man bringing her grandfather home. Are you Santiago? She asked coolly. I took the initiative to briefly explain his circumstances over the past 2 years, the day I saved him, the care, and why I brought him in person. I didn't want him to be shocked. He trusts me. Emily listened, her eyes gradually softening. Face to face, Emily quickly recognized him, even though his memory was no longer intact. She called him Grandpa affectionately, tears streaming down, gently hugging him. The old man didn't call her Emily correctly, but he responded familiarly, stroking her hair, seeming more at ease near her. To reassure me, Emily had the family lawyer and private doctor verify the missing person records. They brought out old photos, identifying marks, stored medical information, a quick DNA test, fingerprints, and legally confirmed the old man was Arthur Caldwell. 100% match, the lawyer said professionally. I exhaled in relief, but my heart felt heavy. As I prepared to leave and say goodbye, the old man grew confused and anxious, clinging to me and gripping my hand instinctively. He mumbled for me not to go, his eyes panicked. Seeing that, Emily realized that even back in his old home, Arthur still saw me as his safest anchor. Stay a while. Give us a chance to thank you, she said, her voice emotional. Our first interaction was cautious. We both observed and assessed each other. Emily saw I had no ulterior motives, no demand for the reward, nothing. And I saw she genuinely cared about his well-being, not power or money. We talked briefly, exchanged phone numbers, and I left feeling full of anticipation. Life had changed, and I knew this was only the beginning. As I prepared to leave and say goodbye to the old man, now Arthur, as I had to call him, a middle-aged man entered the house through the main door, moving hurriedly but trying to maintain an air of authority. He was around 50, with salt and pepper hair cut short, wearing a smart gray suit, but his eyes were sharp as knives. Emily introduced him immediately, her voice slightly tense. This is Richard Caldwell, my grandfather's eldest son. He's been running the family empire all these years while Grandpa was missing. Richard stopped in his tracks, looking at Arthur, his father, with an expression I would never forget. In that moment, he froze for a second, panic flashing clearly across his face, almost too raw to hide. His eyes widened, lips pressed tight, as if he were seeing a ghost rather than his long-lost father returning. My heart beat faster. Something was wrong here. Not the joyful reunion I had expected. After just a few seconds, Richard quickly regained his composure, forcing a stiff smile, but his gaze shifted to me with obvious weariness, as if I were an intruder. He called his father's name loudly, his voice artificially warm, and stepped forward to hug Arthur awkwardly. The old man, Arthur, only nodded vaguely with no strong reaction. Then Richard turned to me, his tone icy. "Who are you? Why would an outsider bring my father back without going through the family?" I swallowed hard, trying to stay calm, and explained briefly. "I'm Santiago Wright, the one who's been caring for him for the past 2 years in Portland. I found him on the street, saved him, and now brought him here because Emily contacted me." Richard frowned, his eyes scrutinizing me as if calculating. When he learned Emily had been the one to contact me and agreed to let me bring him personally, his attitude changed completely. He turned to Emily, his voice sharp. "Emily, what have you done? Why did you handle something this important on your own? Without informing me or the family, you've let everything spiral out of control." The atmosphere in the room suddenly grew tense, like a string about to snap. Emily tried to stay calm, her face flushed but voice firm. "I only prioritized Grandpa's safety and well-being. Santiago saved him and cared for him for 2 years. I didn't want any risks." Richard shook his head, his voice louder. "You acted emotionally, letting an outsider interfere in internal family matters without considering the consequences. Do you realize how big this is?" I stood there, filled with unease, realizing Richard's reaction wasn't about the care Arthur had received, the 2 years of wandering, illness, or loneliness, but solely about why this return hadn't been under his control. It was as if Arthur were an unexpected chess piece that had appeared and disrupted his board. I quickly said goodbye and left that grand house, carrying a heavy sense of foreboding. Arthur's family was far from the harmonious, orderly picture their wealth suggested. Beneath the veneer of the luxurious villa and lush gardens lay hidden schemes. I drove back to Portland, my mind reeling, wondering if he was truly safe there. In the days that followed, I couldn't sit still. Though rationally I no longer had responsibility, Arthur had become part of my life. The man who cared for me when I was sick, waited for me to come home for dinner, brought warmth to my cold room. I frequently contacted Emily via texts and calls, asking about Arthur's condition. "How is he? Is he okay?" I'd ask, my voice worried. At first, Emily replied cautiously, only giving basic information and avoiding deeper family matters. "Grandpa is fine, resting. Thank you for your concern." Her tone was polite but distant, as if hiding something. I didn't push, just sent regular messages, hoping he wasn't lonely in that unfamiliar place. But over time, I noticed troubling signs in how Emily's responses grew increasingly guarded and hesitant. Messages became shorter, calls fewer, and sometimes she paused. "Grandpa is adjusting, but things are a bit complicated." My heart raced each time I read the message, sensing something was happening, and I feared he was being pulled into it. I didn't press or ask intrusive questions. I only cared whether Arthur was stable and felt safe. "As long as he's healthy, I'm happy," I texted calmly. My lack of ulterior motives and patience gradually changed Emily's view of me. After a few weeks, she started opening up more. One late-night call, Emily's voice weary. "Santiago, you're the only one who was there for Grandpa when he was at his weakest, not for money or status." I exhaled in relief, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. After a few such conversations, Emily began to trust that I truly put Arthur's interests above everything else. From then on, she became more open and started sharing what was really happening in the family. Since Grandpa returned, Richard has been controlling his daily life very tightly. She trembled over the phone. "He's restricted from going out, always monitored. Personal decisions, what to eat, who to see, have to go through others, under the pretext of protecting his health. I listened, my heart tightening. Emily gradually revealed more. Old documents related to assets and management authority were being brought up again, sparking disputes within the family. Richard signed many contracts during the 8 years Grandpa was missing, she said, her voice full of worry. Now that Grandpa's back, those decisions could be reviewed. Arthur's return meant Richard faced the risk of losing control over the company and the financial decisions made in his absence. That made Arthur's presence a direct threat to Richard's interests and those of his wife Margaret and son Lucas, who had benefited from that power. Emily shared more details. He's hired private doctors to monitor Grandpa 24/7, but I suspect it's not just care. There are closed-door meetings, and I'm being kept out. I gradually understood that Arthur's return wasn't just a family reunion. It was an event that could upend the entire balance of power. The Caldwell dynasty, with its vast financial empire, was now like a chessboard, and Arthur was the king piece, unexpectedly revived. I realized Arthur might not be in a truly safe environment, even in his own home. Now that he's home, is he happy? I asked Emily, my voice concerned. She sighed. Grandpa often asks about you, calls you the kind grandson. But Richard doesn't like it. Says Grandpa needs rest and shouldn't see outsiders. That unease made it impossible for me to fully step away. Even though I no longer had direct responsibility, I still worked my 3 jobs in Portland, still lived in the cramped rented room that now felt emptier than ever. But my thoughts were always in California. Late at night, I lay awake thinking about him. The man who made soup for me when I was sick. Now, perhaps isolated in that luxurious villa. I began seriously considering whether I could stand by while the person who had sheltered me at my weakest was caught in a silent, dangerous conflict. What should I do? I asked myself, heart pounding. Anticipation surged every time Emily texted, fearing bad news. The reunion wasn't the rosy picture I'd imagined. It was full of shadows, and I knew I was about to be drawn in. Those days, I lived in a state of limbo, like walking a tightrope between 2 skyscrapers. At Quickmart, my hands trembled scanning items, my mind elsewhere. Delivering food, cold wind slapping my face, I pedaled faster, heart full of worry. Asterisk, was he lonely? Was Richard doing something to him? Asterisk, at night, on security duty, I checked my phone constantly, hoping for a message from Emily. The rented room was now emptier than ever. No more of his mumbling. No more the warm smell of soup. I cooked alone, ate quickly, then lay awake, imagining the schemes within the Caldwell family. I knew I didn't belong in their world, a villa, lawyers, power, but Arthur had become part of me, and I couldn't abandon him. A few days later, Emily reached out to me on her own. It was late evening, just after I got home from the night shift, body exhausted. The phone rang and Emily's voice came through, more urgent than usual. Santiago, I know this doesn't directly involve you, but I want to talk to you. My heart raced. A bad premonition rising. Emily said that Arthur's longtime caregiver, a trusted nurse, had been suddenly replaced without clear reason, swapped for someone new, chosen by Richard. I'm very suspicious, she whispered, voice trembling. My visits with Grandpa keep getting postponed with excuses that he's not lucid enough. I only get short, supervised meetings. I slumped onto the bed, gripping the phone tightly, picturing Arthur, the man who had diligently made soup for me, now isolated in his own home. According to Emily, Arthur had become more withdrawn, with limited contact with familiar people and often in a state of prolonged fatigue. Grandpa sleeps a lot, forgets more than before, she said, her voice full of worry. I think it's due to medication interference, but Uncle Richard says it's just old age. Emily also admitted she was gradually being sidelined from decisions about him, even though she was direct family and had once been the legal representative. I'm excluded from meetings. I'm told I'm too young, too emotional. He's controlling everything. I listened, anger boiling inside. Tension rose as Emily revealed more. She had discovered Richard was arranging for Arthur to sign a full power of attorney, transferring legal and financial control to him on the grounds that Arthur was no longer capable of managing his assets. The documents are already prepared, Emily whispered, her voice panicked. If Grandpa signs, Richard will have everything, the company, the assets, all of it. I'm afraid he's being pressured. I gritted my teeth, imagining Arthur, with his lost memory, being backed into a corner. What should I do now? I want your advice, Emily asked, her voice desperate. I comforted her. Keep watching closely. I'm here, ready to help. But inside, I was uneasy, sensing a storm approaching. In the nights that followed, I lay awake, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. Arthur, isolated, forced to sign, stripped of all autonomy. I wasn't a lawyer, wasn't wealthy, but I knew I had to protect him, the man who had given me warmth when my own blood family turned away. One afternoon, everything exploded. I was out delivering in Portland, sweating under weak sunlight, when my phone rang insistently. It was Emily, voice panicked, almost crying. Santiago, I found out they're preparing to sign the papers this very afternoon. The power of attorney is ready, timed for when Grandpa is at his weakest and most dependent. I tried to intervene, but I was blocked. They say it's an internal family decision. My heart stopped. My hands shook so much I nearly dropped the food bag. They're forcing him to sign. Emily pleaded, her voice breaking. Come right away. If we're too late, Grandpa won't be protected anymore. I need you now. With no other choice, I abandoned my shift, called in an emergency leave, and rushed to my car. Heart pounding like a war drum, I drove to the Caldwell Villa in California, knowing this was a moment for no hesitation. The 8-hour journey felt endless. But I drove like mad, stopping only for gas, my mind reeling with images of Arthur being coerced. When I appeared at the villa gate, ringing urgently, the atmosphere inside immediately tensed, like a drawn bowstring. Emily came out to open it, her face pale, pulling me into the grand living room where everyone was gathered around a polished wooden table, papers spread out. Richard confronted me directly, his face flushed with anger. Who are you? How dare you barge in here? Leave immediately. You have no right to interfere. His voice echoed with authority, but I stood firm, heart racing, but resolute. I'm Santiago Wright, the one who saved and cared for Arthur for 2 years. I'm here because Emily called, and for him. Richard's wife, Margaret Caldwell, a middle-aged woman with heavy makeup and designer clothes, spoke up, her voice shrill. An outsider like you? Coming back here surely means you have impure motives. Get out. Their son, Lucas Caldwell, a young man around 20, arrogant posture, hair slicked back, showed contempt, smirking, a lowlife like you should leave before we call security. I clenched my teeth, anger surging, but didn't retort, only looking toward Arthur, sitting there, his face weary, his hand holding a pen shakily. Emily stepped forward, positioning herself between Arthur and the signing table, her hands slightly trembling, but her voice firm. She spoke, taking a deep breath. Everyone stop. This is coercion. Grandpa is not willingly signing anything here. He's been isolated, his daily life controlled, even his medication. What you're calling protection is actually coercion. She turned to each person, continuing without hesitation. I have plenty of evidence. Medical records withheld, my request to visit unreasonably delayed, and the sudden caregiver change right before today's signing. The room heated up instantly, overlapping protests erupted. But at that moment, I stepped closer. Arthur looked up, his gaze lingering on me longer than usual. His hand slowly released the pen, fingers trembling. He mumbled, his voice weak but clear. You're the good one. He shook his head, pushing the pen away as if it scared him. I don't want to sign, he said, eyes full of confusion. I don't understand this. Don't force me to sign. That shift made the room explode. Richard stepped forward, his voice harsh. He's no longer lucid enough to know what he's saying. Everyone can see that clearly. Margaret immediately chimed in, her voice cold and sharp. This is internal Caldwell family business. Outsiders have no right to interfere or disrupt. Lucas crossed his arms, giving a sneer, glancing at me. It's obvious. This guy has been psychologically influencing him all along. Stop pretending innocence. Arthur shrank back in his chair, a trembling hand clutching mine like an anchor. Emily immediately advanced, standing fully in front of him, her voice now more resolute than ever. "No one has the right to continue this procedure," she said loudly. "My grandfather is not consenting, and his reaction clearly shows he's confused and scared." She looked straight at Richard, unflinching. In this state, any signature would be invalid. Then Emily continued, each word falling heavily in the vast room. "What's happening here is elder abuse, and I won't let it continue." The room fell into a tense silence. No one dared push that pen forward again. In the presence of those there, the family lawyer, nurses, and us, Arthur chose to leave with Emily and me. He held my hand tighter, walking slowly but determinedly. Despite fierce protests from Richard's side, "Stop. This is betrayal," Richard roared, his face purple with rage. Margaret wailed dramatically, "Emily, you're destroying the family." Lucas cursed those traitors. We escorted Arthur out of the villa, rushing to the car in pouring rain, my heart pounding as if it would burst. Afterward, Emily quickly arranged for Arthur to move to a different home, a smaller, more discreet, and independent villa in the suburbs, away from Richard's control. We arrived there late at night. Arthur was tired, but more at ease with me beside him. "Thank you for coming to help me and Grandpa," Emily whispered. I realized that from this moment, I wasn't just protecting one person. I had stepped fully into a power struggle of a family I had never belonged to. Sitting in the new house, watching Emily arrange things, I felt full of anticipation and fear. Richard wouldn't stop. This was only the beginning of the storm. But seeing Arthur sleep peacefully, I knew I had chosen right. This fight wasn't for me. It was for him, the man who had taught me true kindness. After everything in the Caldwell family gradually stabilized, Richard and his family imprisoned, invalid contracts voided, the company restructured under Emily's oversight, life began to return to a more normal rhythm. Arthur stayed in the main villa, his health stable even though his memory remained lost. Emily took on temporary leadership, supported by a new board of directors, and she frequently called me with updates. "Grandpa often asks about you," she said, her voice warm. I remained in the small, discreet house, caring for him on weekends. But gradually, I felt I should return to Portland, to my simple life, away from the power struggles that had exhausted me. I didn't belong in that world of board meetings, lawyers, and vast sums of money. I was just Santiago Wright, the guy who once worked 3 jobs to get by. One afternoon, as we sat with Arthur in the villa garden, he gazing at the flowers, stroking the leaves with a vague smile, Emily looked at me seriously. "Santiago, I want to offer you a job at the family company. Not out of obligation, but because you have the ability. I've seen how hardworking and reliable you are." I froze, my heart racing. Work for Caldwell Investments? In high-rise offices? Meetings with investors? I shook my head immediately. "Thank you, but no. I just want to go back to a peaceful life in Portland. These power struggles. I'm tired of them." Emily didn't push, but her eyes were persistent. "Think about it. Grandpa needs you close, and so do I." Those words haunted me. I lay awake at night, weighing it. Returning to Portland meant loneliness again, the cold rented room, the grueling 3 jobs. With Emily's persistence and Arthur's desire for me nearby, he often held my hand, mumbling, "Good grandson," I agreed to give it a try, seeing it as a chance to start over. "All right, I'll try not to let you down," I said, my voice trembling, heart full of anticipation. Could I really do it? I had to learn everything from scratch. The complex operations, tracking investments, market analysis, managing people, business principles I'd never encountered before. The Caldwell Investments office in downtown San Francisco, with its floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the bay, modern computers, and long meetings. Under Emily's patient guidance, she spent after hours explaining, bringing documents home, and with the diligence and discipline honed from my hard years in Portland, I gradually adapted. I stayed up late studying, worked extra hours without complaint, and proved myself through small tasks, analyzing reports, supporting the team. Colleagues initially eyed me suspiciously, a guy from Portland with no prestigious degree, but over time, They respected my serious work ethic, willingness to take responsibility, and refusal to shy from challenges. Once, during a project crisis, a data error, I stayed late, fixing it and saving the situation. A manager clapped my shoulder. "You handled that quickly and effectively. Well done." Over time, I secured a solid position in the company, trusted with more important tasks, overseeing small investments, even attending board meetings. My heart raced each time I entered the meeting room, but I grew accustomed to it, feeling like I was building a new life. In the time working together, feelings between Emily and me developed naturally, without haste or calculation. It started with after-work conversations about the job, about Arthur, about the events we'd been through. We cared for Arthur together, taking him for walks, telling stories, helping him eat. He sat there listening to us talk. Emily was always present in those moments, holding his hand, smiling gently. Arthur witnessed our growing bond with quiet contentment and satisfaction, sensing his life was truly protected. But then the past knocked again. One day, while I was at the office, security called from the lobby. "Two elderly people are here looking for you," saying they're your parents. My heart tightened, a bad feeling rising. I went down to the lobby and saw them. Dylan and Scarlett, my parents, standing there, looking worn out, clothes old and dusty from travel, their familiar, yet distant, eyes leaving me stunned for a moment. Dad was thinner, his hair completely white. Mom, gaunt, clutching a worn handbag. Dad called my name, his voice tired. They had tracked me down, surely through media coverage of the Caldwell case. We went to a private office, the atmosphere tense as a drawn string. They said Kevin had squandered everything, gambling, partying, racking up massive debts, leaving them destitute and desperate. "The house is about to be foreclosed," Mom cried, her voice shaking. "Your brother disappeared, abandoning us with all the debt." They begged, hoping I'd once again shoulder everything. "You're the eldest son. It's your responsibility," Dad said forcefully, as if my years of sacrifices had never existed. "Send money home. Save us." I stood silently, listening to every word, heart pounding. Tension rose, not from fear, but from a decisive moment. For the first time, I realized that in their story, I was still just a rescue option. Nothing more. No questions about my well-being, no apologies for the past, just demands. But this time, instead of pain or resentment, I felt a cold, clear clarity. All the emotions that once made me tremble seemed drained. I looked at them, no longer the son, always trying to please his parents. I spoke slowly, my voice calm in a way that surprised even me. "Mom, Dad, I won't continue sacrificing my life to cover others' wrong choices." I said it clearly, without evasion. I wouldn't send more money. I wouldn't take on consequences I hadn't created. A relationship based only on demands, blame, and exploitation was no longer family. I continued, "I've done enough. Now I choose to live for my own life." Dylan erupted immediately. He slammed his hand on the table, his voice roaring as always. "You're ungrateful. You've forgotten all we did to raise you. I disown you." Scarlett burst into tears, sobs breaking. "Son, don't abandon us. You're all we have left." They went on, blaming each other, circumstances, Kevin, even me. But this time I didn't explain, didn't justify, didn't apologize. I'd done that my whole life. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. "Please leave," I said, my voice steady, without anger or trembling. They stared at me, stunned by a decisiveness I'd never shown before. Then they left. No hug, no real plea to stay. Just heavy silence in the room. As the door closed, I stood still for a moment. No pain, no resentment, just a gradual lightness spreading in my chest, as if a rope that had bound me for years was finally untied. In that moment, I understood I had truly severed the past that had imprisoned me. My heart still raced, but it was no longer the beat of fear. It was the thrill of freedom. Ending * 2 years after those tumultuous events, my life had changed in ways I never could have imagined. From an exhausted man scraping by in Portland, I now stood as the Chief Operating Officer, COO, of Caldwell Investments. Not because of my relationship with Emily or any debt of gratitude to Arthur, but because of the confidence and reliability I had built over time. I clearly remember the day Emily called me into her private office, her voice serious yet full of pride. "Santiago, the board has decided to promote you to COO. Not because of me, but because of what you've done, saving that major project last month, restructuring the team, and the way you lead people." My heart pounded, anticipation surging like the first time I stepped into the glass-walled office. For the past 2 years, I had worked relentlessly, from sleepless nights analyzing reports to tense meetings with partners where I had to prove I wasn't an outsider. At first, colleagues still looked at me with skeptical eyes, a man without a prestigious MBA, no Ivy League background. But I didn't give up. I arrived earliest, left latest, took on every difficult task without complaint. Once, when the company faced a financial crisis, stocks plummeting due to rumors, I led the team through 48 straight hours of work analyzing data and proposing a recovery strategy. The result? Stocks rebounded, and people started calling me the quiet hero. The promotion wasn't a surprise. It was the fruit of sweat and discipline. But when I accepted the role, I still felt nervous. Was I worthy? Would my poor past hold me back? Emily, and I decided to get married after a long journey of facing hardships together. Not with fanfare or extravagance, but as a natural choice for two people who truly understood and trusted each other. Our feelings grew gradually through simple moments, evenings sitting with Arthur, sharing stories, walks along the beach, hand in hand, times when Emily was exhausted after meetings, and I'd have hot tea waiting for her. The wedding was simple, held at the villa with only a few close people, Arthur in the front row, smiling vaguely, a handful of trusted colleagues. No paparazzi, no lavish party. We exchanged plain silver rings and short vows. "I promise to stand with you in caring for those we love, in their strength and in their weakness." After the wedding, we moved into Arthur's main villa, the place that had once witnessed so many disputes, closed-door meetings, shouting matches, now truly a home. The grand living room became cozy with family photos. The lush garden was where we strolled every morning. I felt nervous stepping into that house for the first time as a husband. Could I do it well? But seeing Emily smile and Arthur at peace, I knew this was home. Emily and I cared for Arthur together every day, maintaining familiar routines so he could spend his remaining years in tranquility. We woke early, made the vegetable soup he liked, took him for garden walks, and told casual stories about his vague past. He still forgot a lot, but he recognized us, and those moments were full of warmth. Emily was busy with the company, but always made time for her grandfather. "Grandpa, shall I tell you a fairy tale today?" I helped bathing him, giving him medicine, and my heart raced with joy, seeing him healthier, smiling more. Those days were peaceful, though not without small dramas. Once he wandered off in the garden, my heart tightening as I searched for him in the rain, filled with fear. But I found him sitting calmly by the koi pond, and we hugged and laughed. Emily gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl whom we named Clara, meaning bright and peaceful. The pregnancy was full of anticipation. Nights when Emily had morning sickness, and I stayed up rubbing her back. Ultrasound appointments where my heart raced hearing the baby's heartbeat. On the day of birth, I was by her side in the hospital, gripping her hand tightly, as nervous as when confronting Richard. Clara arrived, crying loudly, pink-skinned, with big brown eyes like Emily's. We held our daughter, tears streaming. "Our beloved girl, welcome to our world," Emily whispered. There were touching scenes of Arthur on the swing, Clara on his lap, him mumbling a lullaby, vaguely stroking her hair. Those moments were deeply moving. He, with his lost memories, found joy in his great-grandchild. I watched them, heart-warm but nervous, thinking about the future. Would Clara grow up in peace? One quiet afternoon, Santiago stood silently watching Arthur play with Clara in the garden. Suddenly recalling the path he had traveled from a man worn out by burdens to having a true family. Golden afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves. Clara giggled as Arthur chased her. I stood by the window, my heart racing with emotion. Memories flooded back, The rainy day I saved him on the street, the decision to bring him home, the tense legal battle, and now a home filled with laughter. I realized that kindness isn't always rewarded immediately, but it always leads to relationships truly worth having. Thinking about that journey, I felt a thrill of realization. If I hadn't stopped that rainy day, I'd still be alone in Portland. I understood that family isn't a place that binds people with obligation or blood. Family is where we choose to stay, where we are respected and protected at our most vulnerable. Some share blood but turn away. Others, strangers, become our anchors in the darkest days. What matters isn't where we were born, but who is willing to hold our hand when everything gets hard. My story ends with a simple lesson I paid dearly to learn. Live kindly, but don't lose yourself. Be willing to help others, but also know how to protect your own values and boundaries. Only then does kindness not become a burden and life truly belong to us. Call to action *. This journey taught me so much about what truly matters. I'm curious, what would you have done in my place when my parents asked me to choose? Or have you ever found your true family in the most unexpected places? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.